The morning light seeped through the dense canopy of the Canadian forest, casting long, trembling shadows over the moss-laden trails, and the air was sharp, carrying the faint scent of damp pine and earth. 25-year-old Aria Sinclair adjusted the straps of her backpack and breathed deeply, savoring the crispness, unaware that this hike would mark the final chapter of her ordinary life. She had always been drawn to the solitude of nature, the way trails twisted and disappeared, leaving secrets in their wake. Yet today the forest seemed unusually still, as though it anticipated her presence. Birds called in erratic bursts, and a squirrel froze mid-leap on a branch above, the faint rustling of leaves echoing in the quiet expanse. Arya checked her map once more, tracing the route up Cedar Ridge, a trail notorious for sudden drops and hidden ravines, but familiar enough to challenge even experienced hikers. At the trailhead, she exchanged smiles and brief words with a handful of fellow hikers, her laughter mingling with the morning mist, yet none sensed the abrupt stillness that would soon engulf her path. As she moved deeper, the sounds of civilization faded entirely, replaced by the soft crunch of her boots on the pine needles and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Hours passed as Arya navigated the labyrinth of ferns, overgrown shrubs, and gnarled roots, documenting small curiosities, a hollowed tree, a shimmering patch of moss, the way light fragmented through the dense foliage, and marking each on her map with meticulous precision. By midday, clouds had gathered unexpectedly, shrouding the sun and casting an eerie gray over the forest, and the temperature dipped, sending chills across her skin despite her layered clothing. She paused near a narrow creek, the water clear but unnervingly cold, and refilled her bottle, glancing around for signs of other hikers, but the silence was absolute. Little did she know, this stretch of Cedar Ridge was isolated in a way even the most experienced search parties would later struggle to reach. Arya pressed on, her instincts telling her to remain vigilant, yet curiosity drew her toward a faint, narrow path veering off the main trail, almost hidden behind a curtain of evergreens. The air felt heavier here, thicker, carrying an unexplainable tension, and the forest seemed to shift subtly, shadows stretching and retreating in unnatural patterns. Hours melted together as she ascended, occasionally consulting her compass, feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and unease, a thrill tinged with the subconscious whisper of danger. By late afternoon, she reached a small clearing atop a steep incline, offering a breathtaking view of the surrounding valley. But the serenity was deceptive. Her map indicated she was on course, yet landmarks appeared altered, unfamiliar, as though the forest had rearranged itself in her absence. Arya stopped, breathing deeply, savoring the isolation, recording notes about unique flora, the sound of wind threading through branches, and the occasional distant call of a bird of prey, unaware that these simple observations would later serve as clues in a complex investigation. As the sun dipped lower, shadows grew longer and the forest darkened unnaturally fast, the trees now looming like silent sentinels, and Arya decided to turn back, retracing her steps with careful attention. Yet something subtle in the terrain had changed. The trail markers she had passed earlier seemed obscured or missing entirely. She adjusted her pace, eyes scanning the ground, noting broken branches and animal tracks, her heart rising with a mixture of alertness and anxiety, but she remained composed, confident in her survival skills. Hours later, as twilight began to settle on Cedar Ridge, Arya reached what she thought was the familiar fork leading back to the trailhead, only to find the path blurred by overgrowth and shadow, the forest eerily quiet as if holding its breath. A distant howl, possibly a coyote, reverberated through the trees, and the wind shifted, carrying the faint, acrid smell of burned wood, an anomaly she could not explain. She paused, consulting her map and compass, yet every route seemed distorted, familiar markers absent, replaced by the forest's indifferent labyrinth. By late afternoon, the epic nephew, tiny and idly clothing, bivouacking style, takes on the forest called the Unknown. Within hours, search parties would arrive, helicopters would slice through the fog, and dogs would sniff every corner, yet the forest had already swallowed her whole, keeping its secrets tightly bound within the endless shadows and the silent whispers of the pines. Days turned into weeks, and the absence of Arya Sinclair began to weigh heavily on the small communities surrounding Cedar Ridge. Families, friends, and fellow hikers scoured every reachable corner of the forest, combing through ravines, streams, and rocky outcrops, yet no trace of her emerged beyond a scattered water bottle and faint, indistinct footprints that vanished into the mossy undergrowth. The local police increased patrols and coordinated aerial searches, helicopters cutting through the thick canopy, their spotlights illuminating patches of the forest floor, but the dense trees swallowed every sign of movement. Rumors began to circulate. Some claimed glimpses of a lone figure navigating the trails at dusk. Others whispered about shadows that seemed to follow hikers for miles, yet none could be substantiated. Arya's disappearance was meticulously analyzed. Her equipment was found mostly intact, her map carefully marked, and her backpack left behind, suggesting she had set out fully prepared, yet vanished without struggle. Investigators began to suspect that the forest itself, with its steep ravines, hidden cliffs, and sudden weather changes, had created conditions where even the most skilled hiker could become disoriented. Social media channels, previously filled with photos and posts of her hikes, became a digital memorial, with friends sharing memories and speculating on her whereabouts. Every post was scrutinized by detectives searching for patterns, connections, and hidden clues. They discovered that in her final days, Arya had shared photos of small, obscure locations in the forest. Hidden clearings, unusual rock formations, and abandoned structures, indicating that her curiosity might have led her away from the main trail. Some experts suggested she might have found one of the forest's many old logging paths or a forgotten shelter, leading to her isolation, while others feared foul play, noting that the forest was known to attract transient individuals and illicit activities far from the main roads. As weeks turned into months, volunteers organized small expeditions into parts of Cedar Ridge rarely touched by hikers, discovering remnants of past human presence. Fire pits overgrown with moss, abandoned tools, and broken equipment long forgotten by those who had once ventured there. These findings, however, offered no direct link to Arya, fueling frustration and fear that time was eroding the chances of finding her alive. Arya's family refused to accept the forest's silence as final. They coordinated private search parties, brought in survival experts, and even consulted psychics, desperate for guidance, their hope a fragile thread clinging to every rumor and anecdote. Investigators revisited her map, overlaying satellite images and previous trail markings, identifying subtle anomalies, a faint line through dense undergrowth, a shaded hollow that could conceal movement, or a narrow creek bank where someone could have left traces unnoticed. Yet every attempt to reconstruct her path only emphasized the forest's complexity. Paths disappeared abruptly, landmarks were misleading, and the terrain shifted with storms and seasonal growth, making previous observations almost useless. Months later, law enforcement released composite timelines showing where Arya was last confirmed, highlighting the distance she might have traveled and the areas most likely to contain her. Local hikers began leaving supplies, notes, and messages along the trails in the hope she would stumble upon them, creating an improvised network of signals for the missing hiker. Psychologists speculated about the mental toll of such isolation if she had survived initially. Fear, loneliness, hunger, and the constant awareness of being alone in a vast wilderness. They imagined her navigating the forest with caution, scavenging for sustenance, marking trees, and attempting to create a signal large enough for searchers to spot from above. Meanwhile, the forest seemed indifferent to the human urgency, concealing and revealing only what it chose, turning every step into an unpredictable risk. The case drew national attention as reporters descended on the nearby towns, chronicling Arya's last known movements, interviewing hikers who recalled brief encounters, and analyzing every aspect of her equipment and planning. The narrative became a mixture of tragedy and fascination. A young woman, brave and meticulous, lost to a forest that swallowed her presence so completely that even modern technology could not pinpoint her. Years later, these analyses would prove crucial in understanding the timeline leading to her eventual discovery, but at this point, her disappearance remained a chilling mystery. For the families, friends, and authorities, the forest became both a physical and psychological labyrinth. Every tree a potential hiding place, every shadow a possible sign, every sound a signal of presence or danger. It was during these tense months that subtle sightings were reported, glimpses of a woman moving quietly along streams, footprints appearing near abandoned cabins, and the occasional glimmer of clothing that resembled Arya's hiking gear, but none could be verified, and skeptics dismissed them as illusions born of hope and grief. Still, each unconfirmed sighting reignited search efforts, prompting new patrols, additional canine units, and more aerial sweeps. Yet every expedition returned empty-handed, the forest resolutely silent. As the months stretched on, the mystery deepened. How could someone so well prepared, so meticulous, vanish completely in a place that, though vast, was still traveled by locals and hikers? Detectives theorized that she might have stumbled upon a hidden cabin, a forgotten shelter, or perhaps crossed paths with someone who remained unseen, an invisible presence within the forest. Theories multiplied: survivalist scenarios, abduction, accidental injury, and even voluntary disappearance, yet no evidence could confirm any. The forest, dense and unyielding, seemed to guard its secrets, leaving only the faintest traces of Arya's presence, subtle markers in the earth and moss that spoke of movement, awareness, and struggle. Her story became more than a case; it became a legend, a cautionary tale of curiosity, caution, and the unpredictable power of wilderness, leaving everyone who searched, theorized, or remembered her with an unsettling question. How does someone disappear completely, leaving behind only whispers, shadows, and the faintest footprint of a life once lived amidst the pines? 3 years had passed since Arya Sinclair vanished into the unforgiving expanse of Cedar Ridge, and the forest had slowly reclaimed every trace of her presence, weaving silence through the gnarled branches and shadowed clearings. Most had long given up hope, the search scaled back by authorities, volunteers exhausted, and the mystery relegated to whispered recollections and local legend. Yet one late autumn morning, Daniel Whitman, a young forestry surveyor, ventured into a northern section of the forest few dared to explore, where the trees grew denser, the underbrush impenetrable, and sunlight barely touched the forest floor. He followed a narrow, barely discernible path, guided by topographic maps and instinct, unaware that his steps were leading him into the heart of one of the most haunting discoveries in Canadian history. Thick fog rolled through the trees, obscuring visibility, muting sounds, and transforming familiar features into grotesque shadows. Then, partially hidden by a tangle of vines and moss-draped branches, Daniel noticed the outline of a structure, an abandoned tree cabin, perched precariously above the forest floor, its wooden beams warped by years of exposure, the walls sagging, and the roof partially collapsed. The cabin exuded an aura of desolation, yet there were signs that it had been used, remnants of human activity that immediately raised his pulse. As he approached cautiously, the scent of damp wood, mixed with faint traces of smoke, and the crunch of leaves beneath his boots seemed deafening in the otherwise hushed forest. At the threshold, Daniel discovered Arya's belongings, her hiking boots, neatly placed as those set aside deliberately, a partially filled water bottle, and a weathered journal, its pages yellowed and edges frayed. His hands trembled as he picked up the journal, flipping through pages filled with meticulous observations, sketches of trees and streams, and cryptic notes detailing her days in isolation. Each entry revealed her struggle to survive, her ingenuity in sourcing water, creating shelter, and rationing limited food, and hints that she had sensed an unseen presence in the forest, something that watched silently from the shadows. Some passages described fleeting glimpses of movement among the trees, a feeling of being followed, and the careful measures she took to remain unseen. Yet there were no direct mentions of another person, leaving open the terrifying possibility that she faced the wilderness alone, yet aware of some invisible threat. Daniel's discovery set off a flurry of activity. Police, forensic teams, and search units descended upon the area, navigating the same treacherous paths that had hidden Arya for so long. The cabin's interior revealed further details: makeshift sleeping arrangements, fire pits still carrying remnants of ash, containers for water collection, and evidence of careful survival strategies, each item a testament to her resourcefulness and endurance. Investigators pieced together a partial timeline, comparing entries in the journal with weather records, understanding how she had endured storms, icy nights, and the relentless challenge of isolation. The findings shocked authorities. Arya had survived in extreme conditions far longer than expected, demonstrating not only physical resilience but mental acuity, leaving notes to herself, marking trees to navigate, and attempting to create signals for eventual rescue. Forensic analysis suggested she had spent months within the cabin, yet the exact circumstances of her ultimate disappearance remained unclear. Speculation ran rampant. Had she left the cabin voluntarily, seeking to return to familiar trails, or had the forest claimed her in a sudden accident? Some theorized the presence of a stranger, a transient, or predator, but no evidence confirmed this. Every object, every sketch, every scribbled word became a clue in a painstaking reconstruction of her final days, a delicate map of survival etched into paper and wood. Interviews with nearby hikers revealed unverified sightings months prior to the discovery, fleeting glimpses of a woman moving silently through the underbrush, appearing and vanishing without trace, suggesting that Arya had not only survived but navigated the forest with remarkable caution and awareness. Psychological experts analyzing her journal noted the signs of increasing anxiety, meticulous planning, and acute observation, yet also glimpses of hope and determination, revealing a mind balancing on the edge of fear and survival instinct. The cabin itself became a silent witness, every beam, every nail, and every corner telling the story of endurance and struggle, a monument to human perseverance in the face of overwhelming isolation. For the authorities, the discovery was both a breakthrough and a puzzle. They now had tangible evidence, the skeleton of her survival, yet the final outcome remained a mystery. The forest had guarded its secrets fiercely, releasing only fragments in the form of the cabin, the journal, and personal belongings, leaving room for speculation, legend, and chilling questions. How had she navigated such treacherous terrain for so long? Was there a final moment of accident, or had the forest claimed her silently? Daniel's encounter became a defining moment in the case, providing not closure, but a new chapter, intensifying media attention and public fascination. Arya Sinclair's story now spanned years, her survival etched into the very fibers of the forest she had once traversed, each page of her journal a testament to courage, ingenuity, and the haunting mystery of what ultimately became of her. With the discovery of Arya Sinclair's tree cabin, investigators finally had tangible evidence. Yet the mystery deepened as forensic teams meticulously analyzed the space, her journal, and personal belongings, seeking to reconstruct the sequence of her last months. Each page revealed a woman both courageous and meticulous, documenting her daily routines, survival strategies, and the constant vigilance required to navigate the harsh and unpredictable Canadian forest. She described collecting water from icy streams, rationing dried food, and fashioning rudimentary bedding from moss and branches, while marking trees and rocks to orient herself. Shadows in her writings hinted at fear, a presence she could sense but never clearly see, an unknown watcher whose identity and intent remained elusive. Detectives mapped her entries against satellite images, weather reports, and prior search logs, piecing together a timeline that suggested she had survived far longer than anyone initially believed, moving carefully through dense underbrush, scaling ravines, and avoiding the main trails to remain unseen. Interviews with nearby hikers, forest rangers, and local residents revealed fragmented observations: an isolated figure glimpsed near a hidden creek, the distant glow of a makeshift fire at night, footprints appearing and vanishing mysteriously, but none could confirm direct contact with her. Detectives also examined subtle details in her sketches, noting specific landmarks that had since changed with storms or overgrowth, providing insight into how the forest had simultaneously protected and concealed her. Evidence of her mental resilience emerged in repeated efforts to create signals, markings, and small caches, all indicating a persistent will to survive, despite isolation, yet a growing anxiety that someone or something was watching her. The cabin itself told the story of adaptation: reinforced walls to shield against wildlife, improvised traps and barriers, and the careful placement of items to maintain order and security. Experts in wilderness survival noted her ingenuity, but also the psychological strain evident in her scattered notes, describing fear, moments of despair, and fleeting hope. The presence of minor injuries, implied by notes about scraped hands and bruised knees, highlighted the constant danger of the terrain, and forensic analysis of the cabin floor suggested that she had frequently adjusted her routines to avoid detection, either by wildlife or an unknown human observer. Detectives considered every possibility, from accidental injury and misadventure to the more sinister theory of abduction. But no signs of forced entry or struggle were found inside the cabin, leaving the forest itself as the most likely adversary. Public interest surged as media reports detailed the cabin and journal, emphasizing Arya's extraordinary survival and the haunting question of what ultimately happened after her final entries. Theories proliferated. Had she attempted to leave the cabin and succumbed to exposure, fallen into a ravine, or encountered an unseen individual whose presence had forced her into further concealment? Each theory carried weight, yet none could be definitively proven. The investigation also examined subtle inconsistencies in prior sightings, suggesting that her movements were deliberate, careful, and occasionally strategic, a pattern indicating awareness of possible observers. Psychological profiles speculated that her isolation had honed survival instincts to near instinctive levels, while simultaneously intensifying fear and hypervigilance. The cabin remained a silent witness, its walls imbued with the tension, resilience, and ultimate vulnerability of a young woman navigating an unforgiving environment, leaving behind tangible clues yet withholding the final answer. As months passed, authorities documented every detail of the site, reconstructed her likely movements, and cataloged her notes, each element contributing to a clearer understanding of the extraordinary circumstances, while simultaneously amplifying the chilling enigma of her disappearance. Arya's story became a case study in endurance, psychological resilience, and the capacity of the human spirit to survive extreme isolation, yet it remained a cautionary tale of how a forest can conceal, protect, and ultimately determine the fate of those who venture too far. Despite the evidence, unanswered questions lingered. Had she left the cabin intentionally? And if so, what path did she take? Did the forest claim her in a silent accident, or was an unseen presence responsible for the final chapter of her ordeal? The complexity of Cedar Ridge, with its shifting terrain, hidden shelters, and dense foliage, ensured that every answer led to further inquiry, and every clue raised new possibilities. In the public imagination, Arya Sinclair had become more than a missing hiker. She was a symbol of human endurance, curiosity, and the haunting power of nature, a narrative woven into the fabric of the forest itself. The cabin, the journal, and the remnants of her survival offered insight, yet the forest kept its deepest secret, preserving the tension, fear, and resilience that had defined her final years of life within its silent, watchful embrace. The discovery of Arya Sinclair's cabin and personal effects brought both answers and deeper mysteries, leaving authorities, family, and the public in a state of uneasy fascination. While her journal and belongings confirmed that she had survived in the forest for months, perhaps even years, the ultimate fate of the young hiker remained unresolved. Investigators reconstructed her likely movements from the cabin, noting the careful markers she left behind, the hidden paths she had navigated, and the small signs of her existence etched into the landscape. Yet they could not determine the exact moment or circumstances that ended her struggle. Each detail in her notes, the precise rationing of food, the sketches of water sources, the meticulous tracking of weather patterns, revealed a mind that balanced fear with ingenuity, desperation with determination. Psychological experts speculated on the toll that prolonged isolation had taken. Heightened senses, acute awareness of shadows and sounds, and a cautious, almost paranoid vigilance that may have prolonged her life but also contributed to the difficulties of her eventual escape or rescue. Media outlets, podcasts, and documentaries quickly seized on the story, portraying Arya not just as a missing hiker, but as a symbol of human resilience, ingenuity, and the terrifying unpredictability of nature. Every interview, every report added layers of speculation, some suggesting that she had finally left the cabin to seek help and succumbed to exposure, others theorizing that she encountered an unknown person or threat that the forest concealed. Her family, meanwhile, balanced grief with relief, knowing that their daughter had fought to survive against overwhelming odds, yet haunted by the unanswered questions surrounding her disappearance. Community members, hikers, and locals treated the forest differently afterward, acutely aware that beneath its serene beauty lay hidden dangers, labyrinthine paths, and the silent, watchful presence that had both concealed and sustained Arya. Authorities preserved the cabin as evidence and as a historical site, a silent monument to her courage and endurance, while continuing to investigate leads from the surrounding area in hopes of finding more clues. Scholars of wilderness survival examined her journal, noting innovative strategies, mental exercises she employed to maintain hope, and the remarkable ingenuity required to endure in isolation for extended periods. Despite all efforts, the exact circumstances of her final moments remained shrouded in mystery, the forest keeping its deepest secret. Yet her story had left a permanent imprint, lessons about preparation, resilience, the delicate balance between curiosity and caution, and the unpredictable power of nature. Over time, hikers visiting Cedar Ridge carried with them the story of Arya Sinclair, aware of her journey, inspired by her determination, and cautious of the forest's quiet menace. Her disappearance, though never fully resolved, became a narrative woven into the region's identity, shaping the understanding of the wilderness as both a place of breathtaking beauty and concealed danger. In memorials, online discussions, and survivor analyses, her endurance was celebrated, while the lingering mystery fueled a mixture of awe and fear. A young woman had faced the forest alone, documented her struggle, adapted ingeniously, yet the forest itself determined her final chapter. Every element of her story, from the hidden paths, improvised shelters, and careful observations, to the journal, sketches, and personal items, offered insight into her life, yet reinforced the haunting reality that some aspects may never be known. The story of Aria Sinclair endured not only as a case of a missing hiker, but as a testament to the human spirit, the profound challenges of isolation, and the silent, relentless power of wilderness. For those who study the forest or venture into it, her journey remains a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration, a narrative of courage, survival, and the limits of human endurance. The cabin, now preserved as both evidence and memorial, continues to whisper the story of a young woman who fought against impossible odds, leaving behind fragments of her life, a testament to resilience, and an enduring question about what really transpired within the shadows of Cedar Ridge. Even as years pass, Aria Sinclair's name evokes both admiration and unease, her legacy forever intertwined with the forest she explored, the mystery she endured, and the silent, enduring mystery that ultimately defined the final chapter of her extraordinary journey.